Hello and welcome to another UC Big News Show. Today we have some new guests with us and some really exciting topics. Let's go around the table quickly and introduce our experts for today. We have Elka Popova from Frost & Sullivan. Welcome to the show. Zeus Kerravala from ZK Research. Craig Durr from Futurum Group. And Maribel Lopez from Lopez Research. Welcome everyone. But how could I forget my co-host for today, Mr. Rob Scott. How you doing, Rob?
I'm good, thanks, David. Don't forget me.
So let's get into some topics. A lot has happened over the last sort of month or so. Rob, what is on the agenda for today?
Oh, well, we got a few hot items, but to start with, let's get it out in the room straight away. It's AI. Now, we thought AI might get a cold shower this year, but there's absolutely no way. I think it's going to continue on. AI. It's going to be another year of AI by the looks of things. And very recently, it was Cisco Webex won EMEA in Amsterdam, and they revealed some big AI products there and went GA with some of those as well. So, David, it's over to you. Do you want to dive into those?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're seeing AI features being released all over the market, and it's a bit of a game of sort of one-upmanship in the space right now. But off the back of Cisco Live in Amsterdam recently, we saw automatic meeting summaries and vidcast summaries and automatic translation kind of hit the airwaves. A lot of these features have been actually internally used by Cisco's staff up to now, and they've now just released them so they're sort of battle tested and ready to go. I did think there was a bit of an interesting tool around the low carbon mode, which is a kind of an energy efficiency play. So if you saw that, it allowed sort of IT managers to delay sort of high load activities and angle them towards renewable sources when they're available as well, which is really interesting, especially around in Europe, when we're seeing those regulations around sustainability come through and how much of your tech stack has to be acquired through sustainable means. So this kind of plays into that, which is very, very interesting. But what do our panel think? AI features, Zeus, what is your take on that one?
Yeah, certainly AI is just booming, at least the interest in it. And if you saw NVIDIA's earnings last night, I mean, that's a company that's just, I mean, they've become one of the biggest top, two biggest companies in the world on the heels of AI. For Cisco, as you said, Dave, a lot of the stuff had been announced at Webex 1. So they did announce the GA of a couple of features. And one of the things I like about what the direction that Webex has gone, particularly with this new leadership team with Javid and G2, is they're more focused now on making their products just a lot more user-friendly. I don't think user-friendly was really the calling card for Webex for a long time. And it wasn't until Zoom came along, I think, with their, Meet Happy, that it kicked Cisco into gear. And so the demo they gave of the Webex Assistant actually at Webex 1, the thing I liked about it is the user didn't actually have to do anything, right? The demo they showed was the person got up, they went and answered the door, they came back, they sat down, and the Webex Assistant prompted the user to the question, would you like me to catch you up? And that subtle difference, it will make a big difference in adoption, because I always said if the user has to be the integration point for the technology is likely to fail because people just inherently don't like changing the way they work. And so even if it requires me clicking a button and hitting a drop-down box, even with virtual backgrounds, a lot of people had trouble finding where they were because you had to go to a menu and click here and click there. And so I think what Cisco's trying to do is make their AI as invisible as possible, but still bring the benefits to the user. On the low carbon mode, I like that feature. Actually, Cisco has historically had a bunch of features in their products that, including its routers and switches and things that actually are, they had a feature called Energy Wise for a long time, which would turn ports off when things weren't being used. They just never told anybody about them. So I always thought that they had a lot of great sustainability features that nobody used because nobody knew about them. With this one, it actually, I'm not sure why it's not the default. Actually, I asked them on that in the Q&A, and they said that right now the default is just running in like regular mode. But I would think especially for an EMEA audience, you would want low carbon mode to be the default operating model, and then only turn it on if you want those updates and things like that to be real time. But I do know that sustainability is becoming a much bigger part of decision-making process. In fact, the CIO of one of the UK-based retailers told me that it's 20% of their decision-making process now is based on sustainability. So I think that's a pretty big testament to the stuff that they're doing. The challenge for them is to roll up all their sustainability stuff, though, right? Because they've got the Nexus sustainability dashboard. They've got some stuff with their services group. They got Webex. They got networking, and now I'd like to see them roll it up. But overall, I thought the AI news was good for Cisco. I think they made a lot of strides with Webex. I think their biggest challenge today is getting people to try the product again, because it is a markedly different product than it was before.
Yeah, can I just riff off of Zeus's points for a few minutes? I think that the sustainability is a real opportunity for Cisco on the full stack, because they have, as you mentioned, options on the full stack for that. And it is a buying criterion. People are actually looking to monitor and manage for compliance reporting this year. So I think they've got some opportunity there. They didn't really talk about the real-time media models that they addressed at Webex One, which has a lot to do with enhancing that audio and video quality out of the gate, but also adding in, like, if you look at where the differentiation points are for companies, everybody has some kind of meeting summary right now. One of the things I liked about the real-time media models was they talked about adding in other contextual elements like gestures, facial expressions, other things that really lend to the power of video. And that didn't get as much play in the EMEA audience. And I think that was probably a miss, but in general, they have the feature, and I hope that they spend more time pushing the differentiation of that.
I agree with you. I think a key thing, especially in these visual-centric communications, is the AI that's not seen. It's the untouched AI around the video, around the audio. And we've talked about intelligent audio and intelligent video for a while, but I think what we're seeing around these generative models is really raising the bar on that. And the two other areas also, which kind of speaks to the sustainability, is I think there's a lot more AI in terms of the analytics that's going to be coming to market. And I think this is a really great point for those IT administrators and practitioners. The last one I'm looking at, and this is one of Cisco's 4-point strategies, when they talk about AI, they talk about the AI you interact with in the room. And they haven't leaned into it too much, but the natural language processing. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see coming into 2024, Cisco starting to bring to bear some of those ideas. Maybe they're beta features, maybe there's something like that. But the unseen part around audio and video, the analytics, I think they have a really good story.
And of course, there's very little for me to say on that topic. But I want to echo what the others are saying about the importance of making all AI-powered capabilities kind of intuitive and easy to use, and basically not require any, or at least minimize the need for training and educating users. As a laggard in technology adoption, and I'm embarrassed to admit that as a technology analyst, I speak from personal experience. I mean, sometimes it does take a while to figure out how to use new features, and then a little longer to actually start seeing the benefits and like understand that this is helping you. So with all these AI powered capabilities, it's going to take a while. And the more automated the processes, the more intuitive the experiences, the faster customers will latch on to those and start adopting them. So Cisco's on the right track with doing it easy for them to use.
Absolutely. I mean, the adoption curve on this kind of tech is going to be fascinating to watch, I think, this year. So let's move on to our next topic. Rob, what have we got?
Well, David, another big bit of news very recently was RingCentral's earnings results, the financial results. And love to talk about those in a bit more detail. I think there were some really good positive messages in there. And I'm sure the panel would love to talk around kind of what they think where RingCentral is going with this. So, David, what do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Vlad is back in the building, which is great to see. The headlines are fairly positive over at Ring right now, sort of 9% year-on-year growth, which is great. That earnings call was actually full of big customer wins as well. We heard a 20,000 seat deal, one in the insurance space. There was another 15,000 seat deal, one, I think it was IKEA, and alongside Vodafone, who won that one. Lots going on over at Ring right now. What I'm really interested from my panel's point of view, though, what do they think of the earnings call, number one, but also the approach Ring and Zoom and some of those other big companies are taking to growth. as well in this space. Should we go to Elka? What are your thoughts?
So I think the way to look at RingCentral's results, or even the results of other service providers offering cloud communication solutions, is to decide if it's the glass half full or half empty. I mean, 9% growth is certainly very good under the circumstances. But if we look at this as the glass half empty, we're seeing a real deceleration in the growth of the core cloud PBX capability or cloud PBX service. And that I'm saying this with a caveat. In my market analysis, actually, the industry, or at least the North American and the European markets, are still growing at double-digit rates. But it seems like some of the market participants, and I'm not going to say the full name of the company that starts with M, are really kind of creating a new path for themselves to grow, like carving out a niche for their type of kind of collaboration-centric, collaboration first cloud communication solutions, where you see the collaboration create pull-through for the cloud PBX. And then the maturity of the service providers with, kind of PBX replacement motions out there are seeing their opportunities become more limited. So the market overall is still growing double digits, at least based on my assessment, but many are now seeing single-digit growth rates if they're still relying on the cloud PBX replacement value prop. So that's kind of the tough news for the industry. You can't just rely on that, on the voice functionality. You need more in your portfolio, but you need to do it wisely.
Okay, when you say the market, are you meaning cloud calling or all of UC? When you say cloud, the market's going down.
Very good question. So if we're talking about, let's say, the UCaaS market, I am looking at it from the point of view of the full package of the cloud PBX and the collaboration functionality. I'm not including here the standalone meeting space. That's a different animal in its own right. But if you look at UCaaS, there's obviously downward pressure on the voice functionality. You need to beef it up with other features to get more value and to provide more value to customers and make more money. And these UCaaS providers that have been focusing on the cloud PBX space need to also have additional capabilities in their portfolio to sell standalone, like RingCentral is doing. So back to RingCentral. Like the glass half empty is the fact that the traditional part of their portfolio has slowed down. The glass half full is that they have found ways to grow, to expand their addressable market. And I think they have done that wisely. They have added capabilities that are really complementary to their portfolio and that they can execute on. Oh, well, and the third aspect is that have growth potential. Like web events is a growing space. AI-powered contact center, or CX in general, is a growth space. So these three factors are coming together for RingCentral to enable growth for them. So overall, I applaud them for where they're headed.
Yeah, I do think what's interesting is for knowledge workers anyways, there is a bit of a cannibalistic effect where, like, while cloud calling's down, meetings are up, right? So, you look at us, like, I don't know how many calls you guys do, but I don't ever do calls, right? It's just everything is a meeting. And if you look at other professional, like accountants and law firms, law firms still probably do a lot of calls, but there's a group of workers that have ditched the phone for the meeting. And so the minutes are still there. It's just a different form of minutes and it's being monetized differently. And I do think the monetization part of it's an interesting thing to think about. But I think to your point, Elka, one of the things that Vlad did call on the call was that he is expecting 100 million in ARR by fiscal 25, specifically for RingCX, RingSense for Sales, and Ring Events. And that's going to be interesting to see if they can grow grow that bit that much. And I know one of the reasons they really wanted their own contact center platform, though, is just the ASPs in contact center are a lot higher than they are in calling. So, but that's not dissimilar to the strategy that Zoom has, right? Pushing their center of strength was meetings, and so now they're pushing into phone and contact center. In fact, I think a lot of people know Eric's made himself the GM of contact center. That's how seriously he's taken it, right? And Cisco's selling the suite with Webex, and so everyone's got this expand strategy now, and so it's going to be interesting to see the collision course everyone's on for the bits of the business that are left over that the M company hasn't taken.
You're right. Well, just say the name. Just say the name. Microsoft is redefining and really capturing a lot of that video meeting space right now. I know, though, there's starting to be pushback. Zeus, you have some good feedback for them in market about some experiences you're having as well, too. But that video market does seem to be kind of locking in. So I agree with both your assessment. I see them with the Hopin acquisition. I think that was a great acquisition based upon the value of what they got for the price point. I don't know how big that growth market is in terms of web events, though. I think it's a little bit more limited than that, but it's very complementary. It's call center and contact center. I think that's going to be a big part of them. And a couple of years ago, when they transitioned off of another provider and started bringing things in-house, it kind of speaks to that. But to your point, we can name 2-3 people that are leaning heavily into contact center or contact center as a service as part of their growth strategy. Webex, Zoom. So it's going to be a very highly competitive space, and I think there's a little bit of shuffling of the furniture on the boat deck here between who's going to be having. I don't know if it's net new customers or if it's pulling in services, kind of what you alluded to.
Well, what's interesting is the UCaaS with CCaaS Promise too hasn't really manifested itself, because if you look, the dominant players in CCaaS are still Five9, NICE, TalkDesk, right? All the pure plays. And so while there's been this promise that if 8x8's probably done as good a job as anybody with XCaaS trying to bring it together, customers really haven't bought that way yet to the point where you've disrupted the pure plays.
Well, you got a couple things going on here, right? So the first thing, if we think about RingCentral and everybody else, is like, can you defend your existing territory and just maintain your base, right? Then you go to a platform portfolio play to see, can you add additional revenue streams? What you were just talking about with the UCaaS, CCaaS promise, it's still different buyers for a lot of organizations, right? And that still matters, right? So we haven't seen that strategic CX purchase that happens to bring voice with it. And unless we forget, like, this market is not a new market, right? It's a market that is not a high growth market. The way you grow is to take things from other people or to add more dollars. And that's where we are now. So honestly, if you look at it, everybody has the same strategy except for Microsoft. And what I would say is a little different about Microsoft's strategy is they get to play really nice, interesting shell games about like what you pay for. So therefore, how much of the portfolio do you take? They have a lot of stuff, right? A lot of it's perceived as free. And it's really hard to fight the perception of free, even if it's not free. You've got to convince somebody, if you're Webex, you got to convince them that your software is so much better that I'm going to invest in your suite, even though I already have Microsoft for something else. And I feel like this comes with it. That is a rough play to do. But the power of the portfolio, for example, I shouldn't say nobody, very few people are saying that they think Microsoft is going to dominate the CCaaS market right now, right? There are other people that are really nailing that. So that's an opportunity for companies to say, can I come at it from the CX part that Elka was mentioning? And everybody has an update on the CX strategy that they're doing. So whoever really can capitalize on that, I think, is the person that's going to be able to win. The event space, interesting, but back to the point, how many dollars is that really? So,
lots going on in that CCaaS space right now. Shall we move on to our next topic? Rob, what have we got?
Well, unless you've been living under a rock, David, for the past few weeks, let's talk immersive tech or spatial computing. Apple launched its Apple Vision Pro product, its brand new headset to compete with the Meta Quest 3. it exploded on social media. Did you see it? I mean, I saw the other day a dog walking across the road with a headset on. I was seeing people driving Tesla Cybertrucks. I'm going to bring this back to UC and collaboration eventually, but it was a real showdown. What a launch. Took the world by storm. But there was a few announcements that were particularly interesting in the mix, and we managed to announce those on UC today as well. And that was some enterprise applications from some of the biggest vendors in UC. And David, over to you to divulge those announcements.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've been particularly excited for this product to hit the market. Not that I can get my hands on one or even afford one because they're about $3,500. But yes, the Apple Vision Pro. Interestingly, Zoom, Microsoft, and Webex have all developed their own bespoke apps for the Apple Vision Pro, which is not insignificant news to the layperson. You know, to develop these apps is a lot of time, it's a lot of effort and money. And it's just worth noting that there are some big vendors out there, not necessarily in the collaboration space, but that some people have declined to do this at first. You know, they've declined to develop an app. A big notable, Netflix was one of them. They said, no thanks, we'll, bide our time on this one. But the big three collaboration and UC vendors have come out and said, we're there. We're going to do this from day one. So, I mean, I want to know what our panel thinks of this move. Is this just everyone following Zoom in because they went first, or are we about to see a sea change in collaboration and the way we all interact with each other? Maribel, do you want to kick us off on that one?
Okay. So first, I'm just going to say that I've been skeptical on this space for a long time because we've seen a lot happen or not happen is probably the best way of saying it. I remember being at SAP Sapphire, standing in the room with the goggles, doing the whole vision of all my SAP data, right? So this is not a new concept. Having said that, what I think is the most interesting about this is the timing of the entrance of Apple into the market. There have been many failed attempts at this before, and usually the biggest issue is around usability. And Apple is very good at nailing the usability aspect of something. So they're entering at a time where Microsoft has exited from the Holo space. There were contracts that, didn't end up happening as a result of them exiting. So there is opportunity in the market, and it is at the enterprise level. I think as consumers, we get all excited and we're like, but who's going to pay $3,500? Well, it's not your average consumer. It is a big business. It has a business use case, something like I am an architectural firm and I am designing buildings and it's a global distributed workforce, and that collaboration use case matters. I am doing digital twin plant redesign, things that are millions of dollars that are on the line, that this, it makes sense to buy a few $3,500 or many $3,500 devices to do it. And you have to start there and work it down so that the technology curve is cheaper. We are getting to a point where the headsets are lighter. Their gesturing is so much better than what we've seen in the past. The quality of the visuals is much better. So a lot of the failed promise of the last set of technology has been fixed, but you're still faced with, what do I do with it? If you're a gamer, yeah, okay, that's a different use case. If you're not a gamer, you don't really care so much about it as an individual consumer. Sure, I could watch Disney Plus with a headset or not, right? To the Netflix example. But if I have one of those use cases where I'm facing a labor shortage, I've got all new people in, and there's one person that knows how to train somebody on the blah, blah that's 5,000 miles away, then this is a use case that hunts, right? So there are different use cases. Are we going to see these things flying off the shelves and there's a bazillion of them out? No, but I don't really think that's the point. I think you have to start somewhere. And if they fixed the usability problem, they already have a rich app ecosystem, people that like to build for them. They already have distribution mechanisms into the enterprise for how to buy and manage applications. It could be a win. It's just a longer game. And I think that's the one thing that Apple is good at. They play the long game. So we'll see what happens next.
What's interesting, though, is the use cases you gave are sort of the use cases that we've always had for spatial computing.
Absolutely.
Right? And so the Webex Zoom,
before, right?
the Webex Zoom Microsoft integration doesn't really add to that. Like, I don't really see people, I don't see us sitting around doing this, over headsets, right? Like,
it's not for us. I'm with you.
Right. It doesn't really add anything to it. And so
I actually think it takes away, because what
yeah,
if Zeus, if you're wearing one right now, I don't see you. What do I see? An avatar, and so it's a degraded experience to me. Yeah, because I mean, you can, everyone shows the visual of the meeting Brady Bunch boxes right now, but that one person wearing the headset, how are they represented in that meeting? They don't show that point of view
yeah.
in the marketing
But
screenshots.
what happens when it's not an avatar?
Yeah,
To my 13-year-old, I mean, they're going to grow up with this stuff, right? You know, so it's it feels like
Yeah,
it's
I think
coming. Eventually, it's gonna take hold.
I think what Cisco is trying to do with their own hologram product and doing it kind of in a room without the headset is kind of the maybe what we're doing at Apple is a stepping stone towards that, right? That Star Trek Discovery like experience where you're talking to a hologram and you can kind of interact with them without headsets is ultimately where you want to get to. But right now, I think just I do agree, Maribel, the types of use cases you gave. If I'm looking at investing in a building, you know, in Dubai or something like that, and I want to walk around it, great use case for that. If I'm an auto manufacturer and I want a bunch of people in geographic, great use case for that. But it is just really, really niche right now. And so, you know, especially at that price point.
I think what you brought up, Zeus, about like, do real just general knowledge workers want to use this? Is this the way for them? Is it compelling enough? I don't think we're there yet, but I think Rob's point back on the long game is more interesting. Like, if people grow up with the technology similar to how people grew up with cell phones, does that change the dynamic of what a meeting looks like? And I think that's a longer term thing. But don't you feel like they just picked up on, like, they did the apps and they picked up on the announcement because they want to show that there's forward movement in a collaboration space? I mean, honestly, collaboration isn't, despite all the announcements, if we really look at it, it's not that different. My face is looking at your face. The quality of that's gotten better. The audio quality of that's gotten better. But we haven't really disrupted like what that looks like yet.
No, I think when you get to that spatial computing, that augmented reality, that would be interesting. So, Rob, to your 13-year-old, they'll be used to seeing an overlay of information on top of everything else. And even as, for example, I might be presenting, I can start getting information like audience sentiment. I can get feedback about, am I being long-winded, and things like that, that I think could help in the collaboration element of this. So, promise is there. I agree with you. It's a lot of sizzle. I'm still waiting for some steak.
I like it.
So if people want to go and find out more about the Apple Vision Pro, we do have a sister title, XR Today. We talk about it in great detail. Get yourself over there and you can have a look. Rob, what is next on our agenda?
Well, our final news story is something that has been picked up from our fellow speaker here, Craig Durr. All about hybrid work, and I think we should end on the future work, shouldn't we? Because it's still a very, very hot topic. We see a lot of traffic to pieces on UC today, especially around adapting to the return to the office and things like that. So, David, Craig, who wants to go first on this?
I'll jump in quickly. So, what are we seeing at Deutsche Bank on the surface? It's another policy, hybrid working policy change. And the change is no remote working on a Monday and Friday, which, sucks to be a Deutsche Bank employee, unfortunately. But actually, I think the interesting thing is the story behind this and how the technology we're seeing coming through is actually helping big businesses like this create these productivity gains, creating these hybrid working policies and making these policies work, essentially. Zeus last year famously predicted hybrid work was going to be a disaster. I hope we're not going to see that again this year. But anyway, Craig,
it's mandated.
Craig, what's your take on this?
Well, to clarify what they said at the announcement, they said you can still work hybridly, but you can't take both Monday and Friday off. And their logic behind it is that they had totally empty buildings for Mondays and Fridays, and everyone was clustering on that Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And it actually created strains on their resources as well, too. So there was a little bit where this was an article in the Wall Street Journal, and we put out some communications out there, and people were going back and forth talking about, well, maybe you need to adjust your real estate footprint, or maybe you need to adjust a policy. But the interesting thing that didn't come up was the idea of using technology reservation systems, awareness of who's coming in, things like this, to help really drive a better use case around that. There's companies out there right now. There's Humley, there's Robin, there's some of these UC platforms, Zoom, Webex, Microsoft coming soon with Places. They're incorporating spatial awareness around hybrid work, reservation systems, communications in the context of taking place. And it seems like a big missed opportunity. And I don't think the popular media picked up on that opportunity. It could be a world like this. It could be somewhat of a first come, first serve. You can still take off, Friday or Monday, but first come, first serve on who's available for Wednesday or something along that lines. Or put in group policies, kind of helping to spread out and even that use of those office facilities as well too. So the promise of our technology, I call it workplace experience platforms. There's a lot of great companies out there. Again, AppSpace is another one I just had a briefing with recently. It seems to be ripe. Like, this is setting the stage. This is a great complication of the situation around hybrid work. And I think it's a great opportunity for some of the people in our space to stand up, raise their hand and say, look, this is how you can manage this. It's through data. It's through intelligence. It's through a customer touch point or the end user touch point that helps spread out the use cases here. I think it's an exciting opportunity.
Okay, so I agree with Craig in the sense that it should be an exciting opportunity. I think what's happened is that most organizations no longer want hybrid work. They're still saying that hybrid work's okay, but it feels to me like it's a transition point, and they're testing the boundaries of like how much they can pull it back. So I was actually shocked because, I used to have a podcast called Reimagine Hybrid Work. I was all in on this topic. And the more I talked to organizations and buyers, the more I realized they just weren't going to do it. So where we are now is, I think, the best in class companies will follow what Craig was talking about in terms of, let's figure out how we get you in here enough to do collaboration, to really move the business forward. Because for some people, if you're at a later stage in your career, it's great to be fully remote. You know what you're doing. If you're at an earlier stage of your career, it matters to meet different people and have those experiences and have meetings. And also to have a sense of place when you go to the building, not having that sort of additional anxiety of I'm going to show up and there's not going to be a desk for me there and I'm going to be stuffed in some back corner all day, or that nobody can find me when I get there. I came in to meet with people. I have no idea where they are. It's a new building for me. So I think there's opportunity there. I think companies have to be really clear with themselves on what they're trying to do and be very good about communicating that. There's a lot of anxiety around communication. A lot of people that were hired remotely that, now feel they can't be remote anymore. But when you get to that point where you decide what your policies are going to be and you're really clear about it, that's when you can start to implement some of what Craig was talking about. So hopefully, this is not a technology barrier. This is a change management barrier at this point.
The way I love to talk about it is, I think we're really dealing with this cultural sea change. To kind of use David's term from earlier in the cast. I think companies have relied on some activities and said, this is my company culture. And what's taking place right now is all that was ripped away, and we're trying to build this up collectively. And I think people are realizing that culture isn't just some belief. It isn't some words you put on the back of the wall. It's group behavior. And Maribel, you described some great examples. Do we have a mentoring behavior? Do we all show up in meetings 10 minutes early or what have you? And it's not just because Rob is the CEO and Rob says everyone must show up 10 minutes early. It's because it's a behavior. So I think these real estate problems speak to where people had anchored their culture on their building. And now what they're seeing is that may not be the case. So I agree with you. I think I'm being a technologist zealot in this point. I think there's a lot of underlying problems to solve first, and it's around what is our company, what is the culture. But what I do like is that there's this opportunity for the technology that we talk about and we represent to help grease those wheels, to help make that into a viable change that needs to take place for some of these companies. Absolutely. You pulled me in. I appreciate you doing that. It was the right thing to do.
Absolutely. I mean,
interesting.
that clarity from organisations is going to be so key in making this work as well, as Maribel said. So that brings us into our sort of last topic of the day. Rob, we've got something a little bit different today from one of our communities. To give us the rundown.
Yeah, sure. So this has come from our new UC Today unified communications community that we've just launched in the past week on LinkedIn. So there's going to be a link in the description. It's totally free to join, of course, but we are looking for people to come in to the group, spark some interesting conversation, share some interesting insights, and also get involved in some polls and have some fun and some good chitter chatter. So one of those polls that we put on was all about AI meeting summaries, and we was trying to poll the audience and the members of the group to see what they thought about these AI meeting summaries that we're now seeing a lot of, because there are so many out there now. I was interested to find out what people are actually thinking. So interestingly, the results were 30% actually see the AI meeting summaries as a game changer, and 39%, which was the majority of the votes, find them very useful, but they feel they need more work. There are a couple of other options, subpar, and I've not used one yet, but they were very, very low in comparison to it's a game changer, but it just needs a bit more work. What do you think?
Absolutely. I mean, I was in the it needs more work, but does have some use as well. We're using CoPilot internally for all of our meetings. We're a Microsoft house, and it's been relatively effective, I think. But I haven't seen disparity between these different meeting summary tools. I've had to play with a few of them. They can vary quite a lot right now. I'm sure the gap will close between them, but I'm interested to see what our panelists think as well. Craig, what are your thoughts on AI meeting summary tools? What have you been using?
So I've had a chance, like some of you, to experiment with several of them. I think the most recent one I've been using is the Zoom one as well. But I've also had a chance to take a look at CoPilot. One of here are my two concerns, I think, taking place, why that might be that 39%. One, we don't trust it yet as users. There's an element where you have to go back and read and review it, and there's a lot of cognitive load just sitting there and saying, is this right or wrong to do it? It's just, instead of even just taking the notes to the course of the meeting in itself too. I think these early Gen AI models did have a lot of hallucinations in them, and people were like, no, that's totally off. So you're going in without believing it might be a great summary as of yet. And the time and effort to go ahead and clean it up is part of that. That's the first thing. There was another really interesting thing I saw too, which I think plays into this. It was another survey. I was trying to find the source, but I can't find it right now. But it was saying that 71% of companies are hesitant about internal deployment of tools like meeting summaries because they haven't quite defined their AI policy internally. So think about it. If we're sitting down in a meeting and it's a very official meeting, we have this summary. I could use it for my personal use, but where else do I use it? Do I share it as meeting notes? Do I make it part of an official ledger of what took place and action items move forward from that? I think there's it's still a novel in its use case, and companies haven't quite really embraced it into a workflow that has been considered to be the standard within a company. I think those are the two interesting challenges probably contributing to that 39%.
Yeah. Maribel, what's your take on this?
Yeah, okay, so obviously meeting summaries are useful, right? The question is how useful? And the question is how good. So I think the first question gets back to what Craig was talking about, do they trust the summary to begin with? And there's actually some good reason for pause on that. For example, the transcriptions aren't necessarily always as good as they could be. Many of them do not still transcribe Gen AI as Gen AI. It becomes as Jennifer, it comes as all kinds of crazy things, right? Not Gen AI. So that's thing one. Thing two is, like much of AI, there's generic AI and there's purpose-built AI and your data with the AI. So you often in organizations have all of these phrases and things you use that you don't think of as special, but are not basic language for a model that a basic model will understand. So there's industry terminology, there's your own corporate terminology, there's the fact that they just got the transcription wrong. When you put all of that together, sometimes you're like, yeah, that wasn't that useful. Maybe if you're doing something that is extremely universal, like you're in retail and you're marketing soap, it probably gets all the words right except for your corporate thing, right? But if you're in technology, it's a real problem. It is not very good, as an example. And that's just one industry. If you're in healthcare, this is the reason why Microsoft got Nuance, right? Because when you're trying to do those types of transcriptions and summaries on that, basic industry knowledge and knowledge of the types of data that could be in there really matter. So I think in general, they're great. They need to get better over time for people to really feel that they can trust them, and then they add the value that they need to add. And there's a third thing that nobody wants to talk about, and that's the fact that most of these meetings, not all that interesting of stuff happens. So there's not a lot to summarize. So we talked for 30 minutes and it comes out with like, these two things happened. And you're like, okay.
It just proves that meeting could have been an email is what it does right there, right?
I'm gonna try that prompt next time. Name and shame the people that didn't talk in this meeting, and name and shame the boring people as well.
Well, I've watched vidcasts take, a half an hour meeting and turn it down into 3 or 4 minutes. And when you really think about that, that was the best 3 or 4 minutes. It did the right job. And you're like, wow, there was a lot of extra stuff that was around that. And is that just a human thing? Or like, what is that? And so I found that to be interesting as a concept. So of course you're looking at it saying, this can't be right. There's only 2 data points for action items that happen in an hour-long meeting. Maybe that's what happened.
Well, I'm just going to put a personal experience forward, which is, I'm a man. I can't multitask. I go into meetings. I can't sit and write at the same time as talk and engage in meetings. And so I've been transcribing my meetings for, I don't know, a couple of months, 3 months now at least. And several times a day, I will transcribe and ask. Typically, what I'm finding is some of the native UC applications that have got kind of Gen AI built in, which ones they are, don't always do the job. But if I take the transcription and put that in ChatGPT, I'm finding that I get a much more accurate meeting summary with action points and names and accountability and all that kind of stuff out the back. And although I'm copying and pasting, which sounds a bit crazy, it actually does a job, and it's making me super productive. And because I can't, after a weekend, I can't remember what I did last week. Actually, I'm going back to those meeting summaries for next time I meet with that person or that team, and I'm finding them absolutely invaluable. So from a personal perspective, I find it doesn't hallucinate. I do check what it says, and most of the time it captures, the essence of the conversation and what was agreed. So, hey, it gets my vote, and the better it gets, the better it gets for everyone, I'm pretty sure.
Well, off the back of your forgetting things, Rob, maybe we should remind our audience of the events coming up. What do you think? Do you want to give us a bit of a rundown?
I've forgotten, David. I don't know. I can't remember. But yeah. Oh, okay. Yes. The events page on UC Today. That's uctoday.com/events. You will find that in the very near future, probably by the time this airs, it will be Mobile World Congress. Following that, we've got another event which is very big in our space, which is Channel Partners Conference, 11th of March, 2024. That's over in the US. And following that, again, we've got another big event, which is Enterprise Connect, 25th of March onwards in Florida, which is a huge event, which is very much covering UC, Collab, and quite a lot of CX nowadays. Following that, we've got Google Cloud Next, 9th of April, and we've got Comms V Next, which is very Microsoft focused, on the 23rd of April. So lots of really great events coming up. David, back over to you.
Brilliant. Well, look, make sure if you're attending some of those events, we're going to be at Enterprise Connect and Channel Partners, and you see us walking around, come and say hello and share your insights and what you think of the show. It would be really great to to communicate with you all. So, Rob, that is the end of the show. Let's do a few thank yous, though. Maribel, thank you very much for joining us. Craig, thank you. And Zeus and Elka as well. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your insights. Don't forget that UC Today community. We will put a link in the description, as Rob mentioned. This is where UC leaders are really coming together to share their insights and have conversations about these big topics that are happening in our market day in, day out. So make sure you join. It is an exclusive community. So we do a pre-approve for everyone that joins, but it's really, really high quality conversation that goes on there. So that's it from me, David Dungay, and Mr. Rob Scott. Thank you so much for watching. If you like today's conversation, give us a like and a share on social media, and we'll see you next time.